Hello everyone. So today let's talk about reincarnation and true duality, what the fight really is. So if the source became everything to experience itself through many vantage points seemingly separate from one another in the experience of every single vantage point, and those souls are learning based on and experiencing based on past karma, do the individual lives matter? Does a single lifetime matter? Because in order for the soul to learn and record, it has to see the results of its actions. But that person, whoever we are, like right now, for instance, whoever we are right now, reaping the benefits or the punishments for past karma, we're not gonna remember next time. We're not going to be the same person. So do we even matter as individuals? Do individual lives matter? What's the point? It's a very hard-hitting concept. But, you know, if we can't remember from one life to another, then it would seem like the individual lives don't matter. It's just the soul watching these lives, not actually being in its full glory in these lives. And our personality and whoever we are, you know, fizzles back into, you know, eventually, you know, there's various afterlives and various processes that the consciousness and various parts of ourself go through during soul fragmentation. But eventually, whoever this is, like Hunter, is going to fizzle back in to the grander subconscious or the source or what have you. Hunter is not the soul within Hunter. I'm Hunter, by the way, if you didn't know that. So it doesn't feel like individual lives matter. But if none of the individual lives matter, then nothing would matter, because everything is made up of individual lives. So we see this paradox, this conflict. Because if we have a bunch of negative karma from past life, we don't know when this negative karma is going to stop. We don't know what's going to happen in this life. We don't know if we're meant to suffer for the whole life or not. Be alone for the whole life. To experience loss again and again because we caused losses in the past, in past lives. We don't know. There is remarkable freedom, however, to do with the experiences that we experience in this life, to use the experience and make this life into something better, something else, something more. And if we take every bit of suffering and we mold all that suffering into something beautiful, that's where our freedom lies. Van Gogh, a remarkable genius, great painter, was he, you know, I'm not saying that God or source or whatever you want to call the thing that we're all a part of, you know, dictated through karma. It's not an external thing, by the way. Everything's part of the same thing, but dictated that Van Gogh kill himself. He created remarkable beauty that wasn't recognized at the time with the life that he did have. And maybe because of past karma, he was meant to be schizophrenic, and he was meant to go, by the way, I'm schizophrenic too. And he was meant to go through all these mental trials and tribulations, and without medication, without an understanding of it, putting himself in an insane asylum that back then, you're better off in the street than there. But I remember seeing a painting that he didn't have really outside contact with a lot of people, so he created reworkings of other artists' paintings that he knew. And there's this one painting that he repainted from, I think, from memory. Had to have been from memory. It's not like they had all these great works around. Yeah, he changed it a little bit though. It was a painting of these prisoners in a concrete prison yard. How a lot of them were like that back then, but it was another famous artist had made this painting. He had seen it, but it was these prisoners in a concrete prison yard, basically sky exposed, but it was in the middle, and there was, you know, walls on all sides. Of course, one wall is gone so you can see, but it's like a kind of a pentagon. You have all these dozens of prisoners really tightly packed and walking around in a circle, all chained. And Van Gogh, a lot of people think this is Van Gogh, we don't know, but kind of looks like him with short hair, kind of like a buzz cut. All the prisoners looking down or like looking into the circle. And Van Gogh, who I think is Van Gogh, an orange-haired prisoner, is kind of in the center, and he's the only one looking up and in to the eyes of the viewer. He's the only one that seems to see you. He's the only one that seems to realize his situation in the painting, you know. And he's looking up and gazing at you, and all the other prisoners are seemingly walking around in this circle with, you know, guards and stuff around. There are times in our lives when we see ourselves beyond words. We contact our soul that's beyond something that we can explain, we can describe, that we can transmit. Because, you know, whenever we describe a spiritual experience, it never sounds right, does it? When we describe it to somebody else, or they don't know every single context, or they can't quite see it the way that we did. So there's something lost in the translation, because there's a whole lot of barriers between us and that other person understanding our experience. I think that no matter what the world throws at us, I think that we can use it. And it does seem unfair because Hunter didn't do all the things to suffer what Hunter has suffered, necessarily. We do things in this life. Sometimes karma is in this life. But there's a whole lot of things I've been through that seemed like I didn't do anything to get that. I'm not talking about anything recent. This is, you know, past experiences. And we all feel at one time or another that sense of unfairness. Because if you believe something, and I believe what I'm talking about, but I could be wrong, I could just be crazy, but I believe what I'm talking about. And if what I'm talking about is true, it feels very unfair. And the conditions we find ourselves in, I don't think that we ever get enough to where anyone would break. Maybe in certain circumstances, maybe in many circumstances, but I think that there's a whole lot more room before we break than we think. And, you know, I don't like to say have faith or anything like that. I don't like the word faith, but, you know, you have what you have. What are you going to do with it? So let's talk about true duality. This is kind of a long-winded first part, and this is going to be a much shorter second part. I kind of ramble sometimes, but there are ways, and I don't know the intricate ways to do this. I just know of them. But there are ways to let your ego keep on living from life to life and to continue on being this person, to not dissolve, to not allow this person not dissolve into the grander whole where everything is reincorporated. There's a way to isolate your ego and have your ego survive from lifetime to lifetime. And there's a way to tear very, very far away from the source. Almost the other direction is infinite, but it's virtually impossible to go infinitely in that other direction because there's not other stuff there. There's eventually at some point through the dimensions and through these realities, you can go that way infinitely. It doesn't go back to the beginning, but there's no planets, rocks, other beings. You know, the further away you go from the source. Yeah, I'm using direction direction is not quite it. It's more about frequency, but there's a way to go away from the source. And at some point, there starts to be less and less things, like stuff. Dark realms of contemplation. Before you get there, though, there's plenty of places you can rule as, you know, dark beings and could become a dark god yourself. But, you know, it all starts with the ego and the dedication to that ego. And this is the true duality. and there's a whole lot in between, but basically accepting your path to the source, or isolating your ego and completely dedicating your life to making sure your ego lasts. You know, delving into various methods and techniques, and this takes a lot of commitment. There's very, very few people on this planet right now that can pull it off or would have the commitment to do so. There's some, very few. You won't see them on YouTube. You won't have heard of them. They won't be people in the limelight. You can, but if you can sense energy, you can feel them out there. Not quite sure where, but you can feel them. There's always something pulling in the opposite direction from away to wholeness and oneness. There's always a counterbalance. There's always a tearing away. There's always beings tearing away. Some beings, you know, they might be very selfish and want to hurt things and just care about ego, but they're not good at it. Very few are good at it, and they end up just being able to enter this realm for whoever knows how many lifetimes as individual virus cells, just coming here as individual virus cells. This is very negative. You have to do a lot of bad stuff to get to that level, a lot, for a long time. And there's no guarantee that just being bad is gonna make you a dark god. That's not how it works. It takes intelligence and finesse, to be honest, and on a scale that's hard to comprehend. There's so many promises in the occult world and the spiritual world of becoming like powerful entity. It ain't easy. It's possible. But the true duality of the situation, regardless, is merging back towards source. However you understand that, it can just be a void. I can use the term voidist. It can be a void. We don't have to understand it as like a godhead. It's not necessary. You know, there's ways to understand it. Ultimately, it's not really like a Papa Bear at the top or anything like that. It's not how it works. And the opposite direction is, there is an opposite direction. There is ways to, you know, the old saying, I don't like using Christian terms, but better to rule in hell than serve in heaven. There are ways to do that, but there's a whole lot of other entities trying to do the exact same thing, and there's scarier people and beings than there are on this planet. It's always going to be somebody tougher. And if you're absolutely dedicated to going through whatever it takes to become a dark entity, and you can, let's say you're that for like let's say that you follow this path for 1 trillion years, 2 trillion years, 3 trillion years. You can go that path infinitely, but there's only one direction back. There's not an empire at the end of that path. There's infinite separation. Those souls are always going to end up coming back, and they'll have to travel just as far to get back. The situation does not seem fair, and anybody that tries to sugarcoat it, as far as, you know, you as an individual, this person that is 100 matters. I don't, not really, but everything that I am is recorded. Everything that I do has an effect, and everything that I make out of my suffering was my choice to make. That is where I can reign. That is where you can reign. You are Lord or Lady of your own kingdom. It's all right here. Here, a whole lot of energy that's not in the head. You choose what to reflect back at the world. What you see, you choose how you reflect. Take the suffering. You can choose what you show the world you've done with it. That's the choice. And when you look at it, ultimately, there really is no choice at all. But that's ultimately. Everything's always going to go one way. I have also had the same visions that other people have had of the black spires rising over the earth and the ground cracking and terrible pits opening up. Might happen at some point for a while, not forever. Things like that have happened before. We just can't remember them. Our memory doesn't go back that far. 10,000 years of human history that we kind of remember, it's nothing. It's nothing. And once you look at the grander scope of things, you start to feel how small we really are. But that's okay. The whole world isn't your responsibility. You are your responsibility. And what you care about is your responsibility. Help those if you feel drawn to it. You should help those, but you don't have to listen to me. Do what you feel you are drawn to do. Find what you really vibe with, to put it basically. And do that. Be that. That's all we can do. At any rate, I hope that you found this interesting. Feel free to like this video. It really helps out the channel. And feel free to leave comments. You can tell me I'm full of crap. You can tell me if I missed something, what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear them all, and I try to get back to everybody as long as you're polite. At any rate, thank you very much for watching. Find yourselves and make your suffering into something beautiful.